Okay, we got two more subtopics, and we'll be moving on to a review Monday and a test Tuesday. So make sure that you are out in the Commons on Tuesday, and we'll go from there. Okay, Georgia, at the time it was being colonized, was actually a very forested area. It had a lot of forestry to it. So what they call, and what kind of type of trees are in Georgia? Anybody know? Pine.
You know it.
Pine trees. So Georgia was a very pine forested area. It had a very nice harbor in Savannah. And it was formally founded as a colony in 1733. So pine forested Georgia with the harbor of Savannah was formally founded in 1773. Basically, Savannah was the hub of the colony. In other words, it was a harbor community and was the hub of the colony. So, again, pine forested Georgia with the harbor of Savannah nourishing its settlement was formally founded in 1733. It was named in honor of King George II of
Wait, you
England.
said 73, that was 33.
33, sorry, 1733. Georgia was named in honor of King George II of England, and as I mentioned, proved to be the last of the 13 colonies. So pine forested Georgia with the harbor of Savannah nourishing its settlement was formally founded in 1733. Georgia was named in honor of King George II of England, and it proved to be the last of the 13 colonies. It's kind of interesting when you think about it. It was 126 years after the first colony. What was the first colony? But no, what date, or what colony? Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
So you think about, go ahead please. You think about the 13th colony came 126 years after the first colony, which was Virginia, and ironically it came 52 years after the formation of the 12th colony. And what was the colony that was formed? And remember I said yesterday, we went north to middle to south. That doesn't mean we went in chronological order. Anybody know what colony was the 12th? Pennsylvania was the 12th. So when you take a look at Georgia, it was founded 126 years after the first colony, which was Virginia, and 52 years after the 12th colony. So we had quite a time period between the establishment of our 12th colony, Pennsylvania, and our 13th colony of Georgia. Now, as it says in the subtopic, the English crown or the English Parliament intended for Georgia to serve mainly as a buffer. Okay, what's a buffer? It's an air of protection between two things. Okay, it's in the middle. It's like if I'm going to be a buffer between Cody and Blake or Blaine that don't get along, I'm the guy in the middle that's going to keep them from fighting. Okay, I'm going to be the thing in the middle that keeps them from being in conflict. Or if you are, it's a protector is what it is. Okay, now. What in the world would the English crown have Georgia serve as a buffer to protect from? What were the two enemies of the Carolinas at the time? And we kind of mentioned a little bit yesterday one of them. Spaniards who were settling in where? Florida. So Florida, obviously, if you look at the map, here's Georgia and here's Florida. So one of the enemies of the Carolinas, right here, were the Spaniards in Florida. So Georgia was formed to provide a buffer or protection between the two areas. So the vengeful Spaniards of Florida also were enemies. We also had some enemies in Louisiana, and we're going to talk about that next test material about this particular country and their claims in the New World, which was what? Oh, did you have, what were you going to say?
Did you remember to hit record?
I did.
Because all of us were thinking you didn't.
Well, it's okay. I appreciate the effort. I'll make sure, just to make sure, but I'm sure I did. I'm pretty sure I'm sure.
Can you open the door?
Is that little red button going? Yeah, it's going good. Yeah, you can open the door, bro. So, anyway, let me repeat that. So, basically, Georgia was set up as a buffer colony to protect the Carolinas from two enemies. The first being the Spaniards of Florida. Okay, who else claimed land, especially this Louisiana area? We're gonna talk about that in our next test material. French. So the French in Louisiana. So basically, again, Georgia was basically settled for one cause, to protect the Carolinas from Florida and from Louisiana. And the French in Louisiana and the Spaniards of Florida. Okay. Hannah, do you have your little dictionary? Look up this word here. What is a subsidy? We're going to get official definition from Hannah McKendry. From Hannah McKendry.
Okay.
What is a subsidy?
Yes.
Gift of supporting funds.
Okay, I'm just going to say gift of aid. Okay, a subsidy is a gift of aid. And because they were providing protection for the Carolinas, the English government gave Georgia monetary subsidies, which is on your ID sheet. It's the plural form of subsidy. So because of their protecting or serving as a buffer between the Carolinas and enemies such as the Spaniards of Florida and the French from Louisiana, Georgia received government monetary subsidies. So gift of aid, in this case would be what type of a gift of aid? Monetary, money, okay? Now they were the only colony to receive this type of support from the English government. No other colony received any government subsidies or gifts of aid. It just so happened that the subsidies that Georgia received was money, and money in exchange for providing protection for the Carolinas. Now somebody had to start this colony, didn't they?
Yeah. Maybe.
Okay? How about, Nick, you look up this word. We'll see if we can get the proper definition of this. I gotta spell this. It's on your philanthropist, okay? What's a philanthropist? There's a difference between a philanderer and a philanthropist. A lot of people get it mixed up. What's a philanderer? Anybody know? Philanderer. What's a philanderer? Don't get it mixed up. Okay, what's this? What's a philanthropist?
This philanthropy is charitable act or gift, or an organization that distributes such gifts.
Okay, so an ER, and that would mean it would be a person
Yeah.
that's very, a philanthropist is a charitable gift giver. Okay, someone that gives gifts. In other words, you'll see a lot of millionaires that'll donate money to the library at Montana State University, or somebody that, donates a lot of money in different areas. They're referred to as philanthropists, okay? And philanthropists are the type of people that launched Georgia, okay, or colonized Georgia. So Georgia was launched by a high-minded group of philanthropists who are charitable gift givers, led by statesman James Oglethorpe. So who founded Georgia? Who got the charter for Georgia? Who took the bull by the horn and got a colony in Georgia? A group of high-minded philanthropists led by statesman James Oglethorpe. Okay, so that's who colonized or started the colony of Georgia. It was a group of high-minded philanthropists led by James Oglethorpe. Now they actually had 4 plans for Georgia. 3 other things other than providing the buffer or providing protection from their neighboring colonies. Okay? What else do you think they were going to do in Georgia?
Forestry.
What's that?
Forestry.
Yeah, you'd think so. I mean, you'd think that they would do that, but they really didn't. They wanted to produce 2 other kind of unique things that the Carolinas actually were producing at the time too that were unique.
Right.
Silk.
Wine and silk, very good, wine and silk. So another thing that Oglethorpe and his followers were going to do in Georgia, other than protect their neighboring colonies, they were going to produce silk and wine. Now, the third thing, let me kind of explain it first. In England, if you were a debtor, if you owned a lot of money, what happens today if you're way in debt, you can't pay your bills? What happens to you? You go bankrupt, but what happens to you?
So it's taken away.
You get stuff taken away that you haven't paid for. Okay, you probably can't buy anything else because your credit's bad. You know what they did to debtors in England?
They put them in prison.
Put them in prison.
And they couldn't pay the debt.
That's right, they couldn't pay their debt, they went to prison. So another thing that these people did in Georgia, and mainly led by Oglethorpe, is they provided a haven. In other words, people that had been imprisoned for debt. Okay? Because once they got out of prison for not paying their debt, did anybody like them? Did anybody give them anything? Did anybody treat them right? Well, Oglethorpe had a very good friend who died in a debtor's jail. And so one of the things he wanted to do in Georgia is, when these people got out of jail for debt, he wanted a safe haven, a place for them to go so they wouldn't be discriminated against because they had been in a debtor's jail. And he did that because he lost a good friend who died in one of those types of jails. So not only it was set up to protect the neighboring northern colonies of Carolina, it also was set up to produce silk and wine, and also it was set up to carve out a safe haven for people that had been in prison for debt, because Oglethorpe had a very good friend that died in a debtor's jail and defended him. So he made a place for these people to go. And the fourth reason why Georgia was set up, one of the goals of Georgia, is they did not want slavery. They wanted to keep slavery out of Georgia. That was another goal of these philanthropists and Oglethorpe. They wanted to protect their neighboring northern colonies of Carolina from the French and the Spaniards. They wanted to produce silk and wine. They wanted to carve out a haven for people that had once been in prison for debt, and they wanted to keep slavery out of Georgia. Yep.
But that didn't work for the wasn't Martin
He was. He was actually from Alabama, but yeah, it didn't work forever. That's a good point, yeah. There was a lot of slaves in Georgia during the Civil War time, a lot of them. Now, it was kind of interesting because we always talk about religion. What type of religions came to Georgia? German Lutherans and Scottish Highlanders. So those are the two types of religious groups that first came to Georgia. German Lutherans and Scottish Highlander. What's a Highlander?
I was gonna say, isn't that just like an area in Scotland?
Yeah.
Like the top, like that?
It is, very good. Thanks, Nick. It's a place that the Highland areas in Scotland are just a place where people lived, and so they came from there. So you had German Lutherans and Scottish Highlanders. And so Georgia was very tolerant of all religions with the exception of... Who's the most persecuted religious group in the colonies?
Protestants?
No,
Yeah. I
Catholics.
was gonna say.
Catholics, yeah. So there was religious tolerance in Georgia for everyone with the exception of those in the Catholic religion. Did you have a question, Patty?
Yeah. So you said that they were kind of a buffer for the other colonies. Does that mean they had like a militia just in case a war did ever occur?
Actually, that's a good question. Not so much warlike, but just area protection. Because in those days, it was a little bit difficult, you know, to get from here to here, and especially from here to here. It was a very forested area. It's a good question. It wasn't easy to travel. You got to remember, they didn't have trails in these. I mean, you know what I'm saying? This is real thick wooded area.
So they just wanted to claim that land then?
Who's that? Well, they wanted that land just to provide some protection, you know? In other words, if I put down a bunch of boards in here with nails upside down, so you can't get out that door very easily, you might try it, but you're probably gonna stay back and not, because it isn't really worth the effort, you know what I'm saying? That's the same type of thing. It's a buffer protected area, okay? Now, so we have debtors there, don't we? Poor people there. And we also have a lot of Indians there. And so what groups might come their way to kind of try to convert those people to their way of thinking? What? Oh, you might have said it. What was it? Well, don't, that's the great thing about it. Nobody's going to spank you if it's wrong, okay? What is it? You know, if you get this right, you're really going to be surprised. You might, what'd you say? You're close. You're very close. What are Puritans, what would Puritans try to do?
Purified.
Purify. Well, they're kind of close. It's not, that's very close. Missionaries. Missionaries. So a lot of missionaries found their way to Georgia to try to convert these people. You're right on there, Bailey. They might have been some Puritan missionaries, might have been some Protestant missionaries, there might have been some Catholic missionaries, I don't know. But these missionaries came, you know, the LDS Church, don't you send kids out on a mission? And the idea behind that is to talk to people about the LDS faith, right? They're missionaries. That's the name mission, right? Am I wrong on that? So it's the same thing. These are missionaries that are coming to try to convert these debtors and Indians, these people that they see as maybe not so civilized, into a civilized life in certain religions. It's like, you know, recruiting for anything else. Now, one of the more prominent missionaries in that area was John Wesley. Anybody know who John Wesley is and which church he actually founded that we have right here in town?
Baptist.
No?
Ah.
Lutheran.
No?
Ah.
I can tell you, I'd be surprised if anybody knew, because I have been to this church. I was raised Catholic, but married into this particular church. That's what happens to you guys. Normally what happens is if you marry somebody, you gotta take the girl's religion. Okay, that's how it was in the old days. Matter of fact, when you go to a how many people in here are Catholic? Okay, when you're in the Catholic Church, it's a little bit different than you go into other churches, because people are quiet, they don't talk a lot, you kneel, and you're up, you get a lot of exercise in the Catholic Church. You're up and down and kneeling around, right? Well, when I first went to church with my wife in this particular church, I couldn't believe people actually talked in there before the service. And I go to that church in town here, but it's like when I go, I'm like the youngest one there. I'm not kidding. Really, they're concerned about the church is gonna fold because there's no youth in the church anymore. No, very common church. Methodist. Yep, Methodist. So John Wesley was a very prominent missionary. He served in Georgia, tried to convert people to the Methodist way of thinking. After this, he actually went back to England, and in England he founded what we know today as the Methodist Church. John Wesley. Okay, now Georgia was the least populated of all 13 colonies. It grew very slowly, and there were 3 reasons why it was the least populated colony of the 13. Okay, 3 reasons why. Let me see if we can come up with any. Why would be a reason that people didn't get to Georgia? What's that? Well, that's a good guess, but not exactly right.
It was like later in the colonizer era.
No, not really. It's a good guess, yeah.
The land was garbage.
The land was, he's close. It had a very unhealthy climate there. People didn't like the climate of Georgia. It was an unhealthy climate at the time. It was kind of, maybe not quite those terms, but it was not the most positive place to live. The seasons were different. The land wasn't cleared, a lot of forest. It wasn't a real pleasant place to go. It'd be almost like going to Douglas. Anyway, what's that?
I don't think there's like a lot of places like work.
Okay, why? There you stay with that. Why? Why isn't there a lot of work there?
Well, because the only thing they're producing are wine and silver.
And why aren't they producing tobacco? And why aren't they producing rice? Because they're not allowing slaves. Very good. So the restrictions on black slavery was another reason why, you guys are getting good. I love it. The restrictions on black slavery is another reason why people didn't go there, because they couldn't go there and farm, you know, rice and these types of things very well, because they didn't allow black labor there. And there wasn't enough population there. Remember, in a lot of these colonies, the blacks are outnumbered the whites 4-1. So that was another reason. Very good. And what else? Maybe the easier one. Why didn't people want to go there? It's a buffer colony to keep what? Continued attacks by the French and the Spaniards kept people from moving there. Because after all, it was a buffer colony. They actually did try to make some moves on that, but people didn't want to take the risk of that. So can you imagine living there in a buffer colony that basically was put there in a way to keep, you know, these hostile Spaniards and French people out? They're gonna make an attempt once in a while. They didn't. It wasn't very successful, but you wouldn't want to raise your family in that. So Georgia grew very slowly. In the end, it was the least populated of the 13 original colonies because of its unhealthy climate, its early restrictions on black slavery, and continued attacks by the Spanish from Florida mainly, although there were some French issues too, but mainly the Spaniards from Florida. So that'll take us to our last subtopic then of the day and the test material, which is the southern colonies in perspective. We're just going to talk about them in perspective. The last reason that people were coming was because it continued to tax by not tax, a tax.
So they do
Tax.
have a militia
Oh,
that
wait,
purchases
what?
tax?
Not much,
Oh,
not much.
Tax
or
untaxed.
Like
A tax, a tax.
attack you.
Not taxing money wise.
Like they were being.
Spanish a tax.
Why would the English be taxed like French and Spanish?
That's why I was confused about that, because I was really, why is Spanish taxation?
I've never had that happen, but it's okay, I'll remember it. Okay, the southern colonies in perspective. Let's see if we can guess here. There are 5 of the 13 colonies that were known as plantation colonies. In other words, they were used for growing. Okay, who were they? Georgia was one of them. What were Virginia,
Carolina.
North and South Carolina, and Maryland were considered the plantation colonies in America. Even though there's a lot of tobacco grown in Virginia, wasn't what you'd call them.
Wait, what
Real
was it?
plantation. These are the 5 plantation colonies in America that people refer to as these colonies were
And they were-
made up of mainly plantations. They were Virginia, a lot of tobacco there. Maryland, a lot of tobacco there too, right? North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia were considered the plantation colonies of the 13. Maryland, Virginia, North and South Carolina, and Georgia. Okay, what were the 2 products they were more notably exporting out of the colonies to England and such? Tobacco and, no, sugars in the West Indies.
Right.
Rice. Okay, so tobacco and rice were the 2 main agricultural products in these 5 plantation colonies. Tobacco and rice. Now I'm going to get back to Shania because she was all over it. Slavery eventually hit all 5 colonies, including Georgia, and that happened after 1750. So the